Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Group Chat. We have a very, very special guest, Brent Saunders, former CEO of Allergan, former CEO of Bausch and Lomb. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is really exciting. There's so many things, given your background and what you're pursuing right now, that we have questions on. So I want to just jump into it. We talk about CEOs, we talk about running large companies on this podcast all the time. How does one become a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company? Because we know it's hard work and we know you're smart. So let's put aside hard work and intelligence to the side of it, because there's a lot of people that are smart and hardworking. You clearly have something that's different than a lot of other people. So what is it in your eyes?
Yeah, so I'm glad you wanted to put smarts and hard work aside, but let's maybe forget smarts, because I don't know if I have that. But I certainly work harder than anybody else. So I don't want to minimize that, but I get you. A lot of people think they work hard, but they don't know what hard work really is. So hard work is a lot of sacrifices. But look, I think it's no straight path, right? And there are lots of different ways people can do it. I think for me and what I have seen, what I have done and what I've seen from my friends that are CEOs, we have both a competitiveness about us, compassion about us, and humility about us. And I think those three things, and the two that you put aside, are probably the five ingredients, that you really need to become a CEO. There are a lot of really hardworking, smart people. So I get why you said that. There are competitive people that are hardworking and smart. But I think these last two, compassionate and humility, are probably the ones that define or make the difference in that population of people with the other attributes. The higher up you go, the harder it is to stay humble. When people start to cater to you or say yes to you or do whatever you ask them to do, it's harder and harder to stay humble. And so you have to work harder and harder to stay humble, to recognize the things that you do have a deep impact on people around you, that when you ask people to do things, they may stay up all night just to get something done that you may not even care that much about. To be able to be open to other people's ideas and opinions when you have the final say on something it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of practice. It takes something very special inside of you. And so, having humility is just so important. Something I learned from a mentor that I had very early on. And then compassion. I mean, today, being a CEO isn't just about the enterprise. It's about doing good across the entire ecosystem, and being able to practice capitalistic compassion is important. And I think it's going to define. It is defining today's CEOs. It's going to define tomorrow's even more so, I hope.
When you become the CEO of the companies we mentioned, I'd imagine you're now in this club where the people you're meeting are just the most powerful, biggest titans of industry, presidents of countries, I'd imagine. How do you stay humble when that is the new world that you're kind of interacting with on a daily basis?
That's right. It is true. When I travel, I routinely meet with presidents or senior members of cabinets of countries in the United States or in other big commercial enterprises, the CEOs of the big banks, the CEOs of the big tech companies. We'd all mingle in the same kind of circles, if you will. Yeah. I think the reality is the way you stay humble is, first, most of those folks are pretty humble. There's certainly exceptions. There's some assholes in every crowd. But in that group, there is a lot of humility. People are just regular people, and you got to treat them like regular people, and you got to always remember you're just a regular person. I have two teenage daughters, and that's the best way I could stay humble, is because they just thought I was an idiot about everything. And so anytime I started to feel full of myself, all I'd have to do is spend 10 minutes on the phone with one of my teenage daughters, and I was good to go.
And so, when you look up like the Allergan transaction, it's like $63 billion. I think the transaction size was. Like, how, you're deep into the pharmaceutical industry, that world, and it is probably the most important industry in the world right now, because the entire universe seems like they're trying to figure out a vaccine. And how should we be thinking about a vaccine? And, I've joked about it on the podcast of like, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I believe in vaccination and I believe the power of it. And I understand what it's done for humanity. I'm also nervous about the first version of an iPhone. So I'll probably be nervous about the first version of the vaccine, especially if the president just tries to rush one out in November. But like, how should like us as regular people be thinking about vaccine?
Yeah, so I think vaccines are amazing. I'm a big pro advocate for vaccines. I get all my vaccines. My children get all their vaccines. I urge my parents and siblings to get all their vaccines. I think they do, but I'm not in the room with them. So I'm a big advocate for it. The way I would describe it is, for the most part, and then I'll talk specifically about COVID. For the most part, why do people go to the gym? It's to exercise, right? To get stronger. Why do you go out and run or walk? It's to exercise your heart, to get your heart muscle pumping more and create strength. Vaccines are in essence, a simple way to think about it, are exercise for your immune system, right? The way you get your immune system to get stronger is they develop antibodies. They get used to fighting invaders like viruses and bacteria. And so in the quantity that you get a virus and a vaccine, it is a great way to exercise your immune system and strengthen your immune system. So every year I get my flu shot. I think it's great. You should always get it. Hopefully in 50, 60 years, I'll have such immunity to various strains of the flu. I'll be in great shape. With COVID specifically, it's a pretty simple vaccine right now, which is why, in part, they can be developed so quickly. This is not a difficult to vaccinate against virus. It's not like the AIDS virus or HPV or some of the other, or herpes, which we still can't even vaccinate against. This is a very simple virus. It doesn't mutate. It's very easy to find in the body. It causes a lot of damage because it's novel, which means we have no antibodies. We have no, as humans, novel just means it's new to humans. It's never been in humans before.
Okay. I just thought people were being pompous by saying novel coronavirus.
Yeah, no, it's novel. Novel's the tag you get when it's never first in human. So there is no.
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, unlike flu viruses, which have been around for almost 100 years, we have lots of different levels of immunity in lots of different populations all over the world. This being brand new in humans, just somewhere around the beginning of the year, is why it's so potent, because we just have no experience in our immune system from dealing with this type of virus. The vaccine in and of itself is pretty simplistic. There are about 100 different companies working on the vaccine. There's several that are in late stages. They're using 4 or 5 different types of technologies to go after this vaccine. And this is what I would say. I would be first in line for this vaccine based on what I know today. The idea that the president is rushing this vaccine or pushing this vaccine through is to me just political noise. He may be trying to do that. We can debate that. I think the reality is the companies that are developing these vaccines, the first wave here, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, I know the CEOs of these companies. I know the people who work in these companies. They would never, ever, ever do anything to hurt somebody. No one in our industry, with almost zero exception, works in any other way to cause harm to patients. We want to do good things. We want to run good businesses. We want to solve and treat unmet medical need, help people with disease and burden. We're not trying to hurt people. Yes, we're commercial enterprises. That's how we fund massive R&D projects. But we're trying to do it in a way that helps people. Now, Let's talk about the COVID vaccine. Why would you take this versus the first iPhone? So here's the thing with vaccines. What's the greatest risk downside of a vaccine? You actually get sick. Right. Yeah. So your risk of that, we don't know the data yet. And I'll come back on after the data is published. I'll read all the data and we can talk about it again if you want. But the reality is the odds of getting coronavirus or COVID from the vaccine are probably going to be 1 in hundreds of thousands. That's how it's going to be measured. The odds of you getting it by walking down the street are simply higher. It's just higher in the United States from going out to the grocery store, whatever you do, out to dinner, whatever you're doing. And if you're not leaving, if you're isolating in your house, maybe then your odds are better. But if you're actually doing some things outside, your odds of getting it are higher. So I'd rather take my odds on a vaccine and get immunity than take the odds of getting it and getting really, really sick. And so it's just a risk question. Your risk is so much better taking the vaccine than not right now.
What's so interesting is just hearing you explain it. This is part of the problem with today's information source is like nobody's even explained it as simply as you just explained it. Because vaccine to me has become the mask. It's so political. And we already know there was a poll, I think New York Times said, that said like half the country wouldn't even consider it.
I know. It's a shame because to get us back to normal, right? What we perceive as normal, we need we need to build immunity or herd immunity. And the only way to do that is a vaccine or getting a lot of people really sick and losing a lot of people. And I think the choice is pretty clear, which we'd rather do. Yeah. But the politicization of COVID across the board, both sides of the aisle, all over the world, is, I think, one of the saddest things I've seen in the last several years. It really is horrific what has happened by everybody involved.
And can you walk me through kind of the arc and the way you were thinking about how serious and damaging this virus was going to be? Like, you're obviously in the know, you have the experience, you talk to senior people from all industries. When did you realize that, oh shit, this is the real deal and it's going to affect the economy in so many ways that we can never imagine?
Yeah, I think for me it was probably in very early days in March, probably. The thing I was against the way the United States approached it initially. I lived in New York at the time, or was in the New York area at the time, and the way the governor there very aggressively closed the state and the mayor closed the city, I thought was an overreaction. I still believe that. I do think we should have used our resources to protect the vulnerable, the elderly, people who are immunocompromised. But I think the public health implications of closing society over time will far outweigh the harm caused by the virus. And that's a pretty serious statement considering 200,000 Americans have died. Yeah. I get that. But what we didn't have a public health expert in the room. We just had virus hunters. Dr. Fauci, an amazing guy, tremendous respect. But he's a virus hunter. His goal is clear: eliminate the virus. That has to be balanced with people who look at public health. Think of all the cancer screenings that were missed. Mammograms, colon cancer, skin cancer, prostate cancers, because people were afraid or their doctors were closed. That's going to result in millions of deaths over a 5-6 year period. We're not going to be able to even pinpoint where they were. All the children who have been isolated or taken out of school, all the inner city kids that perhaps their only source of food were in the schools that were then closed. There's so many different, the vaccines for children, right? Because wellness visits were canceled. I mean, I can go on and on and on. The implications of that we will be paying for years and years and years as a society. And no one's counting that into the equation. We're just so focused on COVID cases. They're running this counter on CNN of how many people died. If we did that with the flu, we would never have left the house in the first place. So we should have protected the old. We should have protected the immunocompromised. But we should have figured out a system, much like we have in place today, where we have social distancing. We have people wearing masks. We shouldn't have politicized that. Masks are a great protector from this thing. Good hand washing, good hygiene, and gotten people who weren't at high risk to continue their daily lives.
We've joked about this on our podcast. Let's assume LeBron James only has 2 more seasons left as a Laker. Will I be at Staples Center in the next 2 years to see LeBron James play live?
Oh, I think you will be.
Okay.
I think you will be. Yeah. I think, look, I think...
I gotta see the king. Gotta see the king.
But being that I now live in Miami, I'm going to have to go with the Heat.
That stings.
Yeah. But look, this vaccine is going to be out in the first quarter. Clearly, by the first quarter, even if it's pushed by a few weeks, it'll be out in the first quarter. The data will be published, and then we'll be able to make. Smart people will be able to read the data and provide opinions outside of what you hear from politicians. I'll be first in line, and then I'll be in the stands at the Heat game watching them beat the Lakers.
Well, I'm getting the vaccine too if we're going to a game. So moving to another topic that's been super interesting for us is I noticed you're on the board of Cisco Systems, which is one of the largest companies on earth. And, Kanye last week went on this rant of tweets that he wants to be on the board of Adidas and wants to be on the board of Gap, won't do anything till he gets on the board. Forget his tactics. We all agree that that's not the way to go about it. With that being said, he should have negotiated that before signing the deal to get a board seat. Then we start doing a little homework on, I've always been curious on who sits on the boards of a lot of these companies. And I had firsthand experience helping several people hopefully get on publicly traded boards in different industries. And I've noticed that they don't have a lot of background on that particular industry, but because of relationships, we're able to get those board seats. When I think about Nike and I see Michael Jordan not on the board of Nike, how does the whole board world works? Because we're not clearly in it because we're clearly missing a relationship or two. So what does it take to be on a board and what goes on there?
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about it. Look, I think Michael Jordan could be on any board he wanted to be on. I would take some of his caliber, expertise, track record, you name it. That guy's just a winner and you want him on your board and you want him around your team, no matter what. He makes all teams better. Put that aside for a second. Look, I think being on a board is about, you'd have to have a passion for the company. It's a lot of work for relative to what you get in compensation. Now, boards are highly paid, but versus being a CEO or a vice president or a senior vice president, it's relatively less. The second thing I would say is they can require a tremendous amount of time. And your fiduciary obligation is to all shareholders and stakeholders, not necessarily to the company in and of itself. The third thing is you have to probably bring some kind of specific skill set. So, for example, at Cisco, I'm probably one of the few non-tech world board members. But what I do bring to Cisco is having been a sitting CEO up till May of this year. Which is, I think, very helpful for the CEO there to have someone to talk to and bounce ideas off as a fellow CEO. I also came from an R&D intensive, intellectual property intensive, global company that was highly regulated. And Cisco, being a tech company, is an R&D intensive, IP intensive, global company that is now becoming very regulated like healthcare. And so I brought a lot of that expertise to the table. But when I built my boards at companies, I always tried to think of people with deep domain expertise in the industry that I was in, biopharmaceuticals, and people who could bring relevant experience. So, for example, if we were expanding internationally, let's say China was a big market, someone who had built a business in China would be important. Any kind of relatively recent sitting CEO, global CEO would have been helpful to me. Someone who brings, if you have a big issue in logistics or quality, control, someone with deep domain expertise in that, even if it's not in biopharma. So you try to build your board that way, and then you look for diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of color, sex, you name it. You look for diversity because you want your board to be, a great melting pot of different ideas. And the one thing I always said, and I guess this is more for CEOs than board members, but people would always say, who are your advisors? When I'd be talking to investors or doing interviews, they'd say, who are your advisors? Who are your mentors right now? And I would say my board of directors. And people would look at me like, what are you talking about? I said, that's what the relationship between a CEO and a board of directors should be. Too many times, so I see where it's a very formal relationship where boards are over here, management's over there, and they kind of, they really coordinate and think about what information goes back and forth between the two of them. I view that these are the people that are going to help us get through, a war. These are the people you're in the foxhole with. These are the people, that you want to build your strategy with and you bounce your big ideas off of. So I think the board has to be someone who's willing to give their time outside the meeting. So
that's, sorry to interrupt, but Kanye would be a tough board choice then.
Well, I think Kanye, based on what I know, and I've met him a few times, but it's only what I really read. I think he would be a tough board member. But then again, a guy like Michael Jordan, home run. And so I think demanding to be a board member is also a tough place to be. That's generally reserved for activists, people trying to take over a company versus, I think boards today are heading in the right direction. I think the whole corporate governance world is really going through a great change. It'll take a few more years to get to where it should be, but it's really going through a very positive change.
Interesting. And now we want to get to something really fun. It is absolute Spac Mania in the stock market right now. IPO and Spac Mania. I mean, Allergan is almost worth as much as Snowflake, right? And and nobody knows what Snowflake even does.
That's right.
But we saw that you're entering that game in the healthcare space. What made you want to do that? What do you think of the Spac vehicle? Like, educate us on what, the same knowledge you dropped us on vaccines, which now I'm like lining up for. Tell me why we should get into this.
Well, good. And then I'll work on your iPhone next time.
iPhone you can't sell me on. I know that's a scam.
SPAC is special purpose acquisition company. What they are is they're called kind of blank check companies. So you go out and you raise money in an IPO. Let's say $400 or $500 million in an IPO. You basically raise it on the back of your own credibility. People believe that you're going to be a smart investor with that money. Then you have this pool of money, and you have to go out and you have to find some company to buy. And so some people would call it an alternative to an IPO. So instead of a company going through the traditional IPO process, they go and they sell themselves to a SPAC, and they're instantly public. Why I liked it is I have some ideas of things that I think could really make a difference in healthcare. And my alternatives for raising the capital to do it were either to go to private equity, to try to raise it, friends and family on my own, or to do a SPAC. And the SPAC is, for me, the most efficient way to raise that capital. I don't have to pay $2 and $20 to a private equity guy just to loan me capital. I didn't need their expertise. I didn't need their diligence. I didn't need their, company name on my business card or anything like that. So to me, it's another way of sourcing funds to help companies go public in a way that's perhaps more democratic, right? It trades on the stock exchange. The shareholders get to vote on your IPO. And it's a little bit, in my humble opinion, it's a little bit more open. It's a little more democratic, and it allows capital to flow to help small companies become bigger companies. And so for me, it just made a lot of sense. It won't always work. There'll always be exceptions to it. There'll be financial people who come into the SPAC world just to make a buck. But I think for most part, when you see an operator like myself doing it, they're generally doing it because they have ideas on how to build a business.
So I have a question. My first job out of college, I was an investment banker. I was an analyst at Citigroup, and I worked on a SPAC in 2006, 2007, and then I hadn't heard the term or the vehicle until it didn't get in vogue till the last 8 to 12 months. What changed in the capital markets that there's a SPAC gold rush?
Yeah, I think two things changed. They were starting, you're exactly right. They were starting to get popular in 06, 07, 08. They were starting to really take off then. And then we had the Great Recession, right? The 08, 09 recession. And a lot of the SPACs went belly up. And so just that left a bad kind of taste in the SPAC world, if you will. So that kind of went away. Now there's so much liquidity, and there's so much, the markets are so hot for IPOs. Like you said, Snowflake. Who knows what they even do and what they're worth so much money. There's just this huge demand for or appetite for new companies coming to the market. And there's so much liquidity because, we just put trillions and trillions of dollars either through the Fed or through stimulus into the economy. And most of it went to the U.S., and the U.S. stock market was the primary beneficiary of all this liquidity. So now is a good time to raise capital, and SPACs are an easy way a relatively easier way to do it. So I think that's it. It's just I think they would have kept going, and it would have been very popular today, but for the 08, 09 recession.
Got it.
And then just in general, on the concept of going public, I mean, obviously there's a lot of incredible companies that are going to go public in the next 12 months, in the last couple months. But there's a lot of questionable stuff that's come out that I look at the metrics, I look at the numbers, we look at the 10K and we're like we're in fashion. We don't lose money. Our business checks all the boxes to go public. Should we just go public? I mean, it seems like a gold rush. I mean, Laird Superfood is worth $375 million and on very little revenue and heavy losses. So it's just that also scares me that there's a lot of people here that clearly are just buying to some hype.
Yeah, I mean, look, my 2 cents would be going public isn't all it's cracked up to be, right? It creates liquidity, perhaps an alternative currency in the form of your equity or your stock. But it also creates a whole bunch of different demands around how you think about the world, how your strategy will be implemented. And so, my suggestion would be I would not go public unless I saw a clear path to growth and profitability within, a real short period of time, 12, 18 months, something in that order of magnitude. Because all you need is, and you can go public in a hot market like this, not be profitable, right? The market could turn, which can happen at any point, and then you're going to get devastated. You're going to have then somebody come in and acquire your stock either in a short or in a hostile way, and they're going to manipulate your company and take it away from you, or force you to do things you don't want to do. And that's just the system, right? It weeds out the weak over time. In a hot market like today, everybody feels like a hero, right?
Yeah,
but
of course.
The second that turns, unless you have a kind of a Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Jeff Bezos, Amazon kind of story, but those are 1 in 100,000, right? Very few people are that successful. Most companies just don't get through that way.
Got it. So I have 2 important questions to ask that are more on the light side. I saw you're 50 years old. You look like you're 25. What's the secret here?
Remember, I make Botox and Juvederm and colescoping and all, and all the, not just, I make real medicines too, but I had the fun of making all the aesthetic stuff. So maybe that's it. Although I haven't,
what should I get started? I'm 40. I just turned 40 2 weeks ago. What should I get hooked on?
I don't know. You're looking pretty good there, my friend.
Okay.
Some fillers under the eyes.
And look, to be fair, I don't have anything because I haven't done anything since COVID hit. But what I would say is I exercise every day. It's part of my DNA. I get up first thing in the morning, go to the gym. I've been doing it for 6-7 years now, and it has helped preserve me more than anything else. And so I do think just living a healthy lifestyle is the best way to avoid aging. And the second best way, believe it or not, I know a lot of people say this, is sunscreen. The sun is so damaging to you as you get older. You think you're invincible when you're in your 30s and 40s and you're out there in Tulum or on the Miami beach or wherever you're doing. And then, you're going to pay for that 15 years later, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. The other question I have is, what is the most important place you vacation?
The most important place I vacation?
Meaning fun, beautiful, but you got to be there. We have our places, for us, Super Bowl is important, Coachella is important. We love Mykonos. Those are our
right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like just going out to the grocery store since I've been in this lockdown mode is the most fun I'm going to have.
Whole Foods is it.
You know what? I have a place in a very special, a small place on an island called Baker's Bay. It's my paradise for sure. But unfortunately, I was hit by a hurricane 2 years ago, and then COVID. So we're all rebuilding still. But I can't wait for it to get back on its feet and get back over there, because it was truly the place I'd love to go and just chill.
Yeah. I feel like we've seen Drake Instagram from there.
Yeah.
I think Justin Bieber got engaged there. That was one of the...
Okay. Yeah. It's Yellowstone Club. It's Discovery, all those Discovery properties, right?
All those Discovery properties, yeah. Actually, I haven't been to Yellowstone. I've been dying to go there. My buddy has a place there, and he keeps inviting me, but no way to get there given the COVID situation.
Yeah. Anand's a big fan of it.
I got lucky enough to get an invite there once. It was amazing.
For skiing or for the summer?
I went for skiing for New Year's, and then I had an invitation for summer. They went to play golf, but I couldn't go.
Yeah, they're supposedly both great.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy person. Very informative for all of our people because these are all topics we talk about. And like one thing we don't like to spread is like incorrect information on stuff. And you clarified a lot of things, I think, for our audience that we really needed to understand. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I'll put on my Instagram when I go get my vaccine, which means, and I'll read all the studies, believe me. So then you can look at my Instagram and see that I got my vaccine, and then you know amazing. You're clear.
Yeah, I'll come wherever you're taking it, so I know it's good.
Deal. Done.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.